Hello to everyone. I am Denard. I am an associate professor, and this is the third video regarding knowledge on the EU and sharing knowledge with students regarding the EU. As I stated in the previous videos, these videos are complementary to the lessons and to the books and notes that you have received by me or by our colleagues. While in the first video, I explained the difference between international law and European law, in the second video, I focused on the basics of the EU law. Currently, in this video, I would like to underline the main institution of the EU. Without losing time, I would like to start immediately. And I'm going to focus immediately in the most important institution, which is the European Parliament, which is ruled in Article 14 of the Treaty of the European Union. In the last elections, this is how it is the division of the groups of the European Parliament. In order to make a group, there is the need to have at least 23 members who come from at least 1/4 of the EU 27 member states, which means at least 7 countries. One person, one member can belong to more than one group, or he can decide to also do not belong to any of these groups. These pictures, which is taken by the source of the European Parliament, show the division of the European Parliament in November 2022. These slides shows the numbers of the members that each country sends, and we are going to explain it later. That is disproportionately elected, which means that smaller countries are overrepresented. And the maximum of the member that one country can send is 96 members, and this is the case of Germany, and at least 6 members, which is the case of Malta, Cyprus, Luxembourg, and Estonia. So, as I stated in the second video, there is an importance of sovereignty, and there is a direct election of the European parliaments from the EU citizens. And the sovereignty is given to the EU institution through the consent of the member states. And this is done directly by written in the constitution, for example, in Germany and in France, or by interpreting the clauses that give power to the international law, as it is the case of Italy, or by facts, as is the case of the Netherlands. The European Parliament, jointly with the Council, exercises the legislative and budgetary function. It is elected by EU citizens, and as I said before, is degressively proportional, which means the smaller countries are going to have a higher representative compared to the big countries. The election is of 5 years, and it is a direct universal suffrage in a free and secret ballot. What this means that all the population has the right to vote, and I would like to underline the decision of the European Court of Human Rights that stated that any limitation of the right to vote has to be considered with a right to proportionality. This means that a general and automatic restriction to the right to vote, for example, to prisoners, it is a violation of Article 3, Protocol 1 of the European Convention on Human Rights. Then is the direct suffrage, means that votes are immediately voted, then it is freedom, which means without interference. Countries that in their national election has an obligation, it's mandatory to vote. So, for example, as in Belgium or in Greece, then it is also mandatory to vote also for the European election. And the European Court of Human Rights has underlined that the fact that there is a mandatory election, it is not a violation of Article 9 of the European Convention of Human Rights. Equality means one vote, one person, and security means not public. And through the fact that it is secured, it is also codified the freedom to vote. The general rules, as I stated before, are the same as are applied in the case of the national parliaments. And there is a minimum wage, which is as same as in the national parliament, which is generally 18, but sometimes can be 16, for example, in Austria. The salaries are the same, which means it does not depend from which country you come from, but you are going to have the same salary as the other colleagues. It should be underlined the fact that the European Parliament does not elect the executive. This is different from how the law in the national constitution works. In the EU level, there is no real executive because the main function of the executive are done by the Council and the European Commission. In the Treaty of Lisbon of 2009, the Parliament has a high power compared to the Commission because it appoints the Commission. However, the Parliament does not have any control over the Council. The European Parliament has budgetary power. It has power regarding international agreements, for example, the accession treaty of the EU member states. It has also power compared to the Commission, not only because it appoints the Commission, but also because through 2/3 of its majority of the member can pass a motion regarding the resignation as a body of the Commission. The location of the European Parliament is in Strasbourg. However, its members were between Strasbourg, Brussels, and Luxembourg, which is very costly because the secretariat, the general secretariat, is in Luxembourg, while the preliminary sessions are held in Brussels. So now moving on with the European Council, I would like to say that the Treaty of Lisbon underlined the power of the President of the European Council. It shall be stated that the President of the European Council has does not have a national mandate, but it has a European mandate. It is 2.5 years, and it can be renewed. The European Council does not exercise legislative function. This is really important to underline, and it represents in the EU at the international summits in the area of foreign and security policy. The main goal of the European Council is to give guidelines to the Council and to the European Commission. The composition of it is the head of the state or the government of the member states. It is its president, the president of the European Commission, and obviously the high representative of the Union for foreign affairs and security policy. Regarding the Council, its composition, it represents the governments of the member states. General is the junior minister responsible for the matter under consideration. So, for example, if it's a matter regarding financial law, the Minister of Financial Affairs is going to be represented there. It is divided in 10 different groups. One group is led by the High Representative of the Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, which is the section regarding foreign affairs, while the other 9 are represented by the President. Then it is supported by the General Secretariat, are working more than 2,800 officials, and its goal is to balance the interest of the member state with the interest of the EU. It shall be underlined that the Council is an union institution and it is not an intergovernmental conference. It votes through a qualified majority, except that the treaty provides otherwise. Qualified majority means that there is the need for at least 55% of the member of the council, which represents at least 15% of the member states, which represents in total at least 65% of the population. However, there is a possibility of the blocking minority, which are represented by 4 member states, and they can not stop the decision. This is the goal, that the work of the council can not be stopped by small states. Then, as I stated before, in general, the council is going to vote in qualified majority, but sometimes it can vote simple majority, which means at least 15 member states, or it shall vote unanimously. And in this case, abstention does not block the decision, and these are the cases of taxes, social security, determining if a member state has infringed a constitutional principle, or in the case of a common foreign and security policy. The tasks of the council are legislative tasks, are also ensuring coordination of the economic policies of the member states. It develops the EU common foreign and security policy on the basis of the guidelines set by the European Council. It is responsible for concluding agreements between the EU and non-member states or international organizations, and it is also it plays an important role in the case of the budget, where the guidelines are given by the Commission, the draft is done by the Council, but the approval at the end is done by the European Parliament. The role of the High Representative of the Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy is important in the case of the Council, because in the case of the Foreign Affairs, it leads the working, and this role was also crystallized in the European Constitution of 2003, when he was called as the EU Foreign Minister, but here it is called differently. Continuing on with the European Commission, it is 1 member for each EU member states. Each commissioner is responsible for portfolio, which is assigned by the President of the European Commission. The tasks are initiating union legislation, monitoring the application of the EU law, administering and implementing EU legislation, and representing the EU in international organizations. The European Commission is led by the President, which has the goal and the task to lay down guidelines within which the Commission has to work. It has a sole organization control. It appoints the first vice president and the other vice presidents. In the European Commission is seated also the High Representative of the Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, who is also ex officio the vice president of the Commission, and the member of the Commission must resign if its president requests so. The president has the goal to lead the works, which are divided in 5 areas. The term is of 5 years. The president is nominated, then the president nominates the members of the European Commission, which should be at least 1 member by state, and then the president of the Commission, the high representative of the Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policies, and the other members of the Commission are officially appointed. So the task of the European Commission, as I stated at the beginning, is the right to initiate legislation. It's a guardian of the EU law, represents the interest of the EU, and it is politically independent executive arm. Continuing on with the Court of Justice of the European Union, it is an independent union. It started its work in 1952, and it continued also with the Treaty of Rome of 1957. It is in 2 levels. The first level is the Court of Justice of the European Union, which has 1 judge per country plus 11 advocates general. It shall be mentioned that in general, what is stated in the opinion of advocates general is so ruled by the court. Then we have also the General Court, which is 2 judges per country. It is the highest authority which monitors the application of the EU law, interprets the EU law, and gives legal opinions which are legally binding if EU would like to sign an international treaty with a non-EU member states or an international organization. And as I mentioned in the previous reader regarding the possibility of the EU being part of the European Convention on Human Rights, the opinion 2 of 2013 is legally binding is legally binding for the EU, because the opinions of the Court of Justice are legally binding in case that the EU would like to sign an international agreement to be part of international organization. The roles of the Court of Justice can be from the Constitutional Court to Administrative Court in the case of reviewing administrative act of the Commission, to the Labor Court in case that it's dealing with the freedom of movement. It also deals with Fiscal Court in the case of validity and interpretation of the directives in the fields of taxation and custom law, but also in the it has figures of the Civil Court because it is hearing claims for damaging or interpreting the provisions on the enforcement of judgments in civil and commercial matters. Continuing on with the European Central Bank. The location is in Frankfurt. The task is the stability of the euro. It defines and implements the monetary policy of the Union as the exclusive rights to authorize the issue of banknotes and coins within the EU. It manages the official currency, that reserves of the member states, and ensures the smooth operation of the payment systems. Then also in the EU, we have the Court of Auditors, and which was set up in 1975, but it started to work only 2 years later. One member is elected by each country, and they elect together the president, which has a mandate of 3 years and be re-elected. The task of the Court of Auditors is to examine whether all revenues has been received, examine all expenditure incurred in a lawful and regular manner, and examine whether financial management has been sought. Continuing with other advisory bodies, in particular with the European Economic and Social Committee, we still with the cases of economic and social groups, and also with the Committee of the Region of the European Union, which has advisory powers in several cases such as education, culture, public health, employment policy, etc. Then we have the European Investment Bank, which is located in Luxembourg, and it has as its task to provide loans and guarantees in all economic sectors. So, concluding this video that briefly underline the importance of the different EU institutions, I would like to underline that the EU operates through different institutions, and the role, task, the way of election, the location are clearly stated in the primary sources of the EU. I would like to thank you for listening to the third video, and I hope that you will join also in the next video.